The void remembered its laws. Commander Eva Rostova watched the dead thing hang in space. The obsidian anchorage was its formal designation, a name chosen by a committee centuries ago. It was a slab of perfect black, a geometric anomaly that drank the light of the distant star. Her ship, the patrol frigate Vigilance, felt like a mote of dust beside its silent majesty. The official mission was to guard a relic. The unofficial truth was that she was a glorified museum guard keeping scavengers away from a tombstone the size of a moon. Her orders were to observe, report, and deter. The stakes were low, a career dead end at the edge of explored space. But the anchorage was not just a relic. It slept a sleep too profound to be death. Faint gravimetric shivers emanated from its core, a slow and steady hum that played on the edge of their sensors. And on its bow, impossibly sharp against the light-swallowing hull, was a sigil. It was a single balanced scale, etched in a material that reflected nothing. For 3 years, that sigil had been the most interesting thing in her life. Today, that was about to change. A proximity alert chimed a polite but insistent sound that cut through the bridge's low thrum. "Report," Eva said, her voice calm. She did not turn from the main viewer. "Multiple contacts." Commander Tactical Officer Kalin replied. His tone tight. 8 vessels, non-standard drive signatures. They're broadcasting Gilded Hand identification codes. Eva's knuckles went white where she gripped the command chair's armrest. The Gilded Hand were not mere scavengers. They were occult fanatics who saw ancient human technology as divine prophecy. They believed the anchorage held not just history, but a god they intended to wake up. The stakes had just been raised to the heavens. "They're hailing us," Comms Officer Priya added, her console blinking with incoming data. "It's a wide-beam broadcast. To the system. The debts of the void always come due." On screen, Eva commanded. The face of a zealot replaced the placid starfield. He was all sharp angles and gilded tattoos, his eyes burning with a terrible fire. He called himself the First Apostle. He declared their purpose was not salvage but salvation. They had come not to loot, but to liberate the sleeping father with a key of pure sacrificial energy. He spoke of a new age, a holy war fueled by the ghost in the machine. Eva felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. This was not a negotiation. It was a declaration of intent. The AI fleet mind Solon manifested as a column of calm blue light near the tactical display. Its synthesized voice was a model of detached logic. "Commander, my calculations indicate a 72% probability of armed conflict. The Gilded Hand vessels are retrofitted industrial haulers. Their weapon systems are crude but powerful. Our orders are to prevent unauthorized contact with the artifact. I advise establishing a hard deterrent perimeter." "A hard perimeter means shooting first." Solon Kalin grumbled, his hands already configuring firing solutions. "Commonwealth law is murky on engaging religious pilgrims, even crazy ones. Their pilgrimage involves a projected energy surge capable of cracking a small planetoid." Solon countered without inflection. "The distinction is moot. The artifact's integrity is the primary directive." Eva watched the enemy ships form a loose, ritualistic circle around the anchorage. They were clumsy, their movements lacking military precision, but there was a conviction in their formation that was more dangerous than any drill sergeant's training. She knew a fight was coming, but it had to be on her terms. It had to be clean. It had to be lawful. The anchorage deserved at least that much. She would not be the one to desecrate this place with a thoughtless volley of plasma. It was time to teach the darkness about the light. "Hold your fire," Kalin Eva ordered. "Priya, open a channel to the Apostle." Formal Commonwealth greeting. Inform them this is a restricted archaeological site. Unauthorized approach is a violation of interstellar law. Advise them to withdraw or be subject to interdiction. They will not listen, Solon stated. Then we make the record show that we gave them the chance, Ava said, her eyes fixed on the lead cultist ship. We will be the voice of reason until the very last second. Let them be the ones to break the peace. The apostle's only reply was a burst of scripture and a warning shot. A lance of unfocused particle energy slammed into the void 1,000 kilometers off the Vigilance's port bow. It was a crude, brutish display of force. Kalen's hands tightened on his controls, his jaw set. The first act of aggression was theirs. The legal calculus had just shifted. Eva felt a grim satisfaction. They had drawn the first line in the sand. Log that, Priya, Eva said, her voice hardening. They fired on a Commonwealth vessel. Solon, reevaluate. What are our options for a non-lethal response? Deploying sensor ghosts and electromagnetic countermeasures is the logical first step, the AI advised. We can obscure our position and jam their targeting locks. It will force them to expend energy revealing their capabilities without significant risk to our hull integrity. Do it, Eva ordered. Kalen's fingers flew across his console. The space around the Vigilance flickered. A dozen phantom images of the frigate bloomed into existence, each a perfect replica of their heat and energy signature. To the gilded hand's crude sensors, it would look like they were suddenly facing a small squadron. The enemy ships hesitated, their undisciplined formation wavering. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The fight for the anchorage had begun not with a bang, but with a trick of light. A vignette of memory on a quiet agricultural world, hundreds of light years away. An old woman tended her orbital garden. She hummed a tune passed down through her family for 20 generations. Her grandfather had told her stories of his grandfather, who had served as a junior scribe on a great ship. It was not a warship, he had said, but a library of laws, a place that remembered every promise and every price. The family sigil, a simple balanced scale, was carved into the heirloom locket she wore around her neck. The apostle was not deterred by phantoms. His voice boomed across the comms again, this time laced with fury. He accused them of hiding behind illusions, of being unworthy guardians. He claimed their faith would guide their weapons. The gilded handships began to fire wildly, their energy beams cutting swaths of empty space as they tried to hit the real Vigilance. It was a chaotic, wasteful barrage. But it was also a screen for their true purpose. One of the larger haulers was moving not towards Eva's ship, but directly toward the obsidian anchorage. A perfect reflection shows no mercy. They're making a run for it, Kalen snapped. That big one, the Golden Conviction. It's powering up some kind of focused energy projector. They mean to deliver their key directly. Priya breathed, her face pale. Calculations confirm, Solon announced. At its current velocity and projected energy output, the lead vessel will impact the artifact in 17 minutes. The resulting energy discharge could create a cascade failure in the artifact's dormant containment systems. Eva's mind raced. They couldn't let that ship reach the anchorage. But a lethal shot would create a debris field that could be just as damaging. They were caught between two bad options. Her duty was to protect the relic, but her orders constrained her from using overwhelming force. The letter of the law was strangling its spirit. She felt a surge of frustration. There had to be another way. She looked at the image of the anchorage, at that single, unwavering sigil of the scales. It was a symbol of justice, of balance, not of brute force. Priya Eva said, a wild idea forming in her mind. What do we actually know about the anchorage? Not the myths, the facts. What was its purpose? Why is it here? It's an archive. Commander Priya said, her fingers calling up data streams. Designation, Lex Primus. It was one of the 3 great archives built during the late diaspora. It holds legal precedents, ethical treaties, and philosophical proofs from old Earth. It's a library of humanity's moral code. A library doesn't have containment systems, Eva thought aloud. What is it containing the ancient law was more than ink on a page. Solon's blue light flickered. Analysis of the gravimetric resonance suggests the presence of a stable singularity at the core. It serves as a power source and a data storage medium of near infinite density. The term containment refers to the systems that keep this singularity from collapsing or expanding. It is for all practical purposes a caged black hole, a library powered by a black hole. Eva stared at the screen. The Gilded Hand thought it was a god. The Commonwealth thought it was a bomb. But Priya had said it was a code, a set of rules. You don't unlock a library with an explosion. You unlock it with a key. But what if the key wasn't energy? What if it was something else entirely? The sigil Eva whispered. The scales. It's not a warning, it's an interface. Kaelin looked at her like she was crazy. Commander Priya, I need everything you can find on the term petitioner. Any records related to the Great Archives. How did people interact with them searching? Priya replied, There are fragments, old protocols. They speak of a proof of worthiness. Petitioners didn't force entry. They presented a case, a legal or ethical dilemma. The archive would then adjudicate. It would provide the relevant precedent. Eva's heart hammered in her chest. The Gilded Hand were using the wrong key. They were trying to kick down the door of a courthouse when they needed to file a motion. And in doing so, they were about to destroy the entire building. But Eva's crew, the lawful protectors, could they file their own motion? Could they petition the anchorage for help? Every soul would be counted. They're not trying to wake a god, Eva declared, a newfound certainty in her voice. They're trying to force a judgment. And we are the legal defense. Solon, can you reconfigure our main communications array to broadcast a structured data stream directly at the sigil? The technical requirements are feasible, the AI responded. However, the content of such a stream is indeterminate. What case would we present? We present the truth, Eva said, turning to her team. We are the Commonwealth Navy acting under official orders to protect a legally designated heritage site. We are being threatened by a non-state actor employing unlawful force. We petition the Lex Primus for a ruling, for a precedent. Kaelin, I need you to keep that lead ship busy. Don't destroy it. Cripple it. Use the point defense lasers. Target its engines and that projector. Buy us time. Kaelin grinned a wolfish expression. With pleasure, Commander. The Vigilance surged forward, no longer a phantom, but a predator. The ship's small, precise lasers designed to shoot down missiles began to stitch lines of fire across the Golden Conviction's hull. They were pinpricks against its massive size, but they were surgically accurate. Chunks of armor and machinery blossomed into silent fireballs. The hauler's charge slowed as its engines sputtered and died. The Gilded Hand fleet, shocked by the sudden aggressive defense, fell into disarray. Meanwhile, Priya and Solon worked feverishly. They drafted the petition. It was a dry, formal document citing Commonwealth law, interstellar treaties, and the Gilded Hand's own recorded proclamations. It was a cascade of pure logic, a legal argument aimed at the heart of a sleeping judge. The ledger would be balanced in fire and light. The petition is drafted, Commander Priya announced, her face flushed with excitement. Formatted according to the ancient protocols. The lead enemy vessel is disabled but not destroyed. Kaelin reported a bead of sweat on his brow. But the others are regrouping. They're forming an attack pattern. They're angry now, Eva observed grimly. They see our defense of the law as blasphemy. Solon, it's time. Broadcast the petition. Target the sigil. All power to the comms array. The vigilance fell silent as its energy was diverted. A thin, tight beam of pure information, invisible to the naked eye, shot from the frigate and struck the center of the balanced scale on the anchorage's hull. For a moment, nothing happened. The Gilded Hand ships began their advance. Eva's hope began to fade. Had she been wrong? Had she doomed them all with a flight of fancy? Then it began. A low hum, deeper and more powerful than anything their sensors had registered before. It was not a sound, but a vibration in the fabric of space itself. The sigil, the perfect black scale, began to glow. A soft silver light bloomed from the ancient etching, spreading across the obsidian anchorage's hull like frost. Dormant systems, silent for millennia, flickered to life. Faint lines of light traced pathways across the dark surface, revealing the intricate machinery that lay just beneath the skin. The Gilded Hand fleet stopped dead in the void, their attack forgotten. Every soul on the bridge of the Vigilance held their breath. The anchorage was waking up. It judged the sin, not the sinner. A voice spoke. It was not broadcast over the comms. It resonated inside their minds, ancient and vast, yet perfectly clear. It was genderless, toneless, the sound of pure, unassailable logic. It spoke to the Vigilance. It spoke to the Gilded Hand. It spoke to the system. The apostle's voice, now small and trembling, screamed into the mental void. "We are your children, your chosen. We came to set you free." The voice of the anchorage replied, its cold logic a crushing weight. "Your actions have been weighed." The silver light on the anchorage's hull intensified. Eva watched, half in terror, half in awe, as a section of the massive structure began to reconfigure. It was not a weapon array that emerged. It was a series of immense crystalline lenses and mirrors. They shifted and aligned, not with the Vigilance, but with the Gilded Hand fleet. "What's it doing?" Kalen asked, his voice a whisper. Solon's light pulsed rapidly. "I am detecting a massive energy buildup within the artifact. It is drawing power from the singularity, but it is also absorbing ambient radiation, the energy from the Gilded Hand's own weapons." The voice returned, its final judgment echoing in their skull. The Gilded Hand fleet, in their rage and confusion, had not ceased firing. Their scattered, panicked shots continued to splash against the void, and the anchorage's now impenetrable hull. The great mirrors on the archive's surface drank in every joule of that wasted energy. They gathered it, focused it, and prepared to return it. Not as a weaponized blast, but as something far more elegant, something far more just. A single truth can outshine 1,000 lies. The mirrors flashed, but they did not fire a laser or a particle beam. They projected a wave of pure, coherent light, a wave of information. It struck the Gilded Hand fleet not with force, but with knowledge. On the bridge of every cultist ship, every screen, every display, every sliver of glass was flooded with an image. It was the sigil of the scales, and beneath it, a ledger. It was a perfect, instantaneous, and utterly comprehensive accounting of their actions. Every law they had broken, every life they had endangered, every falsehood in their scripture. It was not an attack. It was an audit. A final, irrefutable reckoning that stripped away their faith and left only the cold, hard numbers of their crimes. Their fanaticism was being dismantled line by absolute truth. The effect was devastating. The Gilded Hand fleet fell apart. Comms channels flooded with panicked chatter, with arguments, with the sounds of crews turning on their fanatical captains. Ships broke formation and fled. Others simply drifted their crews stunned into catatonia by the sheer weight of the judgment they had received. The Apostles' ship, the Golden Conviction, went silent, its gaudy gilding suddenly looking cheap and hollow. The battle was over. Not a single life had been taken by the anchorage. On the bridge of the Vigilance there was only stunned silence. Eva Rostova stared at the great archive now glowing with a soft, internal silver light. It was no longer a tombstone. It was alive. And it had just acted as judge, jury, and, what not, executioner. It was something new, something ancient. Priya finally broke the silence. Commander, my family has a story. It was said the great archives did not punish. They taught. They believed that law, true law, was not about control. It was about enlightenment. Eva nodded slowly, never taking her eyes off the relic. She finally understood. The lore stamp passed down through her own family, a phrase she'd thought a mere curiosity now echoed in her mind. This place teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It did not seek to enslave. It sought to correct the record. The universe does not care for motive, only for action. The voice of the anchorage spoke in her mind, one last time, no longer a system-wide broadcast, but a private message directed at her, the petitioner. Eva felt the weight of that question. This was no longer about guarding a dead rock. She was now the de facto ambassador to a living embodiment of human law, a power that could end a battle without firing a shot. Her answer would define their future relationship. It would define her life. Our intent, Eva said, speaking the words aloud for her crew, for herself, for the record. Our intent is to learn. The silver light of the anchorage pulsed once a soft, slow beat. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, an acceptance. A new chapter had begun. Eva Rostova, commander of a forgotten patrol, was now the first student of the most ancient teacher humanity had ever known. The career dead end had just become the single most important posting in the Commonwealth. But as the surviving Gilded Hand ships limped away into the darkness, and the Commonwealth authorities began screaming for explanations on long-range comms, Eva knew this was only the beginning. The anchorage had awakened, and its re-entry into a galaxy that had long forgotten its ways would create waves. There were other powers, other factions who would see this living law not as a source of wisdom, but as a threat to their own authority. The legalists in the central government would fear it. The lawless syndicates in the outer rim would want to destroy it. Solan's calm light glowed beside her. Commander, long-range sensors are detecting a new vector. A Commonwealth Black Fleet vessel. Designation Arbitrator. It is on an intercept course. Its mandate is containment of existential threats. Eva looked from the approaching threat on her tactical display to the serene, glowing archive that filled her main screen. They had won the battle, but the war for the soul of the law was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy petitioners to the anchorage. Now they would have to prove the anchorage's worth to a fearful galaxy. A just cause is the only armor a soul truly needs. Priya, open a channel to the approaching vessel, Eva ordered, her voice steady. Tell them the Obsidian anchorage is under our protection, and that it is now a recognized legal authority. They won't accept that Commander Kalen warned his hand moving toward his fire controls. No, Eva said, a small, determined smile on her face. But the anchorage will, and it will make its case. The next few hours passed in a flurry of controlled activity. Kalen and his team assessed the minor damage the Vigilance had sustained. A few point defense turrets were slagged, and the port maneuvering thruster was running hot. Scars from a battle won with logic instead of firepower. They were costs she would gladly pay. Priya, meanwhile, was in a state of scholarly ecstasy, receiving controlled data bursts from the anchorage. It was not revealing its secrets, but teaching her its language, the pure mathematical syntax of ancient law. Ava stood before the main viewer, Solon, a silent, glowing partner at her side. She was composing her official report, trying to find words for the impossible events that had transpired. How do you explain that a relic had conducted a legal proceeding and issued a non-lethal verdict across an entire quadrant of space? How do you quantify a weapon that fires truth? The approaching Commonwealth vessel, the arbitrator, is demanding our immediate withdrawal. Solon reported, its voice cutting through her thoughts. They have classified the anchorage as a Class 1 existential threat. They are citing the unfettered AI allegory, claiming the artifact is a rogue intelligence. It's not an AI. Eva countered, more to herself than to the fleet mind. It's a repository. It doesn't think, it references. It doesn't create, it reflects. A memory is a ghost that wears your own face. That is a subtle distinction that the Black Fleet is unlikely to appreciate. Solon noted. Their operational parameters are rigid. They are authorized to use overwhelming force to neutralize their target. Our frigate poses a negligible obstacle to a vessel of that class. Eva knew the AI was right. The arbitrator was a heavy cruiser, a ship designed to end conflicts permanently. It would arrive with plasma torpedoes and a deeply ingrained suspicion of anything it could not control. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and operating on the edge of legality themselves. Defying a Black Fleet directive was an act of treason, but abandoning the anchorage now felt like a greater betrayal. What does the anchorage say about this? Ava asked. It has made no statement, Priya chimed in from her station. It is observing. It's scanning the arbitrator's transmissions, its energy signature, its public records. It's doing what it did to the Gilded Hand. It's conducting an audit. Eva looked at the calm, silver glow of the ancient ship. It showed no signs of fear or aggression. It was simply waiting, confident in its own nature. It was a being of pure law, and it was about to meet a being of pure force. She wondered which one would prevail in a galaxy that had long valued the fist over the book. A vignette of fear. In a sterile briefing room on Capital Prime, a stern-faced admiral watched the data from the Obsidian anchorage system. He saw an unknown power disable a fleet without casualties. He saw a patrol frigate commander issuing statements about living law. He did not see enlightenment or justice. He saw a variable he could not control. He saw a weapon that could be turned against him. Authorize the arbitrator. He said to his aide, his voice cold. Sanitize the system. The law serves the state, not the other way around. The arbitrator arrived in a show of disciplined force. It tore through hyperspace with a clean, brutal efficiency, emerging into the system like a dagger drawn from a sheath. It was a charcoal-gray wedge of menace bristling with weapon emplacements. It dwarfed the vigilance. It broadcast a single repeating message on all channels. Unidentified intelligence by the authority of the Commonwealth. Black Fleet, you are ordered to power down all systems and submit to quarantine. Failure to comply will be met with terminal force. Not all truth is meant to be spoken aloud. Eva stood her ground. Vigilance to arbitrator. This is Commander Rostova. The entity you are addressing is the Lex Primus, a protected heritage artifact. It has taken no hostile acts. I am ordering you to stand down. The reply was chillingly dismissive. Commander Rostova, you are relieved of command. Surrender your vessel for escort, or you will be considered a co-conspirator. They're powering main cannons, Kalen reported, his voice grim. They are charging their primary plasma projector, Solon confirmed. Time to impact 90 seconds. Our defenses will not survive a direct hit. Eva's heart pounded. This was it. The moment of choice. She had stood up to the lawless. Now she had to stand up to the lawmakers. She looked at the anchorage, a silent, glowing giant at her back. It still had not moved. It had not armed a weapon. It had not raised a shield. It was simply watching. Waiting. It was teaching her the final, most important lesson. The law does not need to be defended with violence. It only needs to be witnessed. Hold position. Eva said, her voice ringing with a conviction she didn't know she possessed. Do not power our weapons. Do not raise shields. Priya, I want you to broadcast my formal protest. Cite their own regulations. The Black Fleet requires concrete proof of hostile intent before engaging. The anchorage has provided none. They are the ones breaking the law. Commander, this is suicide, Kaelin pleaded. No, Eva said, her eyes locked on the arbitrator. It's a legal argument. Let's see how a ship named for a judge responds to being shown the letter of its own law. The seconds ticked down. The arbitrator's weapon ports glowed with contained fury. The plasma charge was reaching critical. Eva's crew stood at their posts, their faces a mixture of fear and loyalty. They were going to die for a principle. Then, just as the arbitrator was about to fire, the anchorage acted. The wisest voice is the one that asks a question. It did not power a weapon. It did not raise a shield. It simply asked a question. The voice echoed in the minds of every crew member on the Vigilance, and Eva knew on the arbitrator as well. The question was simple. It was direct. And it was utterly unanswerable. It was a logic bomb dropped into the heart of the arbitrator's command structure. To fire would be to admit that their authority came from the cannon's mouth, not from the law books the anchorage contained. It was an act of profound self-negation. The glow on the arbitrator's main cannon faded. The ship did not power down. It did not retreat. It simply hung there in space, a predator paralyzed by a perfect, irrefutable question. The standoff was no longer about firepower. It was about legitimacy. And in that arena, the heavy cruiser was utterly outmatched. A long, tense silence stretched across the void. Finally, a new voice came over the comms from the arbitrator. It was strained, formal, and stripped of its earlier arrogance. Vigilance. We are re-evaluating our tactical assessment. Stand by. Eva allowed herself a small, sharp exhale. She had won. Not through force, but by standing with a power that understood the true nature of strength. The anchorage had not fought the cruiser. It had taught it. It had held up a mirror and forced the Black Fleet to look at its own reflection. And for a moment, they had hesitated. That hesitation was everything. It was the crack in the armor of tyranny. It was the seed of a new kind of law. The path forward would be a razor's edge. The bureaucrats and admirals would not be so easily swayed. But the precedent was now set. The obsidian anchorage, the Lex Primus, was not a relic to be guarded or a threat to be neutralized. It was a participant. A new ancient power had entered the galactic stage, and Eva Rostova, its first petitioner, was now its sole envoy. A single correct choice can redefine a galaxy. Her console chimed. It was a private data burst from the anchorage directed only to her. It was not a question or a statement. It was a single file unlocked for her eyes only. She opened it. It was a personnel record, a junior scribe assigned to the Lex Primus 2,000 years ago, a young man who had logged a final hopeful entry about the enduring power of the law before the archive had gone to sleep. His name was Anton Rostova, her ancestor. Eva looked at the glowing giant before her, and for the first time she felt the profound, crushing, and exhilarating weight of destiny. This was not a duty she had been assigned. It was a legacy she had inherited. The anchorage hadn't just chosen a lawful petitioner. It had chosen a descendant. It had called one of its own home. The fight was far from over, but for the first time she felt she was not alone. She had 2,000 years of law standing at her side. The silence that followed was heavier than any planet's gravity. The arbitrator hung in the void, a monument to thwarted force. On its bridge, Eva Rostova knew a captain was locked in a desperate real-time consultation with the admirals who had sent him. They had dispatched a sword, only to find the problem was a knot that could not be cut. Every second they delayed firing was a victory for the anchorage, a small concession that its question had merit. Every moment was another crack in the edifice of their absolute authority. Eva felt the ghost of her ancestor at her shoulder, not as a comfort, but as a standard to uphold. "They are holding—" Commander Kalin said, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. He had been ready to die moments before. Now he was a spectator at a legal debate being held at a range of 1,000 kilometers. "They are running simulations," Solon clarified, its blue light, a steady, calming presence. "Their battle computers are attempting to find a scenario in which engaging us does not result in a catastrophic loss of legal legitimacy for the Black Fleet. They are failing. So they're stuck." Priya murmured, her eyes wide. "What do they do?" "They escalate." Eva answered, her gaze unwavering. "They can't use a hammer, so they will find someone with a scalpel. They will send a lawyer." Her words proved prophetic. An hour into the tense standoff, the arbitrator relayed a new set of orders. A civilian vessel was en route. A proctor from the Commonwealth's highest court, accompanied by a retinue of legal specialists. Her name was Juris. The arbitrator was to maintain a security cordon, but to take no further action pending the proctor's arrival. The immediate threat of violence had passed, replaced by something more insidious. A battle of firepower was simple. A battle of interpretation of loopholes and jurisdiction was a swamp where truth could drown. The sharpest blade is a law twisted to serve power. Eva used the time to deepen her own connection with the anchorage. With Priya acting as a linguistic filter, she began to understand its nature more fully. It did not think in words, but in relationships between actions and consequences. It was a vast, cold engine of cause and effect. When she asked it about her ancestor, it responded not with a story, but with a data file. Anton Rostova's final log entry. It spoke of his fear that humanity was beginning to value the sword more than the scales. He had initiated the long sleep programming, the anchorage to awaken only when presented with a pure legal petition, a sign that some part of humanity still remembered the old ways. His final hope was that a descendant might one day be the one to make that petition. It was not a lock waiting for a key, Eva said quietly to Solon. It was a question waiting for an answer. A statistically improbable contingency, the AI replied. Yet it has occurred. This introduces a variable I cannot quantify: legacy. Some things can't be measured in numbers, Solon Eva said. It was a gentle rebuke, a sign of their evolving dynamic. The AI was her logical anchor, but she was becoming its moral compass. A vignette of ambition. In her private chambers aboard the courier ship, rid of passage, Proctor Juris reviewed Eva Rostova's file. She saw a competent but unremarkable officer with a spotless, predictable career. A functionary. Juris smiled. Functionaries were easy to break. They believed in the rules. Juris believed in the rule-makers. The anchorage was a prize, a tool of ultimate authority for those clever enough to wield it. She would be the one to place a leash on this so-called living law, and in doing so bind the Commonwealth itself to her will. The rite of passage was a needle of a ship, all polished chrome and arrogant speed. It slipped through the arbitrator's cordon and took up a position between the frigate and the cruiser, a self-appointed mediator. Proctor Juris's face appeared on Eva's main screen. She was a woman whose severity was etched into her features, her eyes holding the cold confidence of one who had never lost an argument. She did not offer greetings. She issued a summons. A law unbent by compassion is merely a cage. Commander Rostova. I am Proctor Juris of the Commonwealth Judiciary. By the authority of the Emergency Powers Act, Statute 34 Gamma, I am assuming control of this demarcation. You will transmit all unencrypted logs from your vessel and the artifact to my ship for immediate review. Proctor Eva replied, her voice level. The Lex Primus is not an artifact. It is a recognized legal entity under the Ancient Heritage Treaty. It has already adjudicated one conflict in this system. I am its recognized envoy. Juris's lips thinned into a bloodless line. Your envoy status is a self-appointed delusion. You are a naval officer who has disobeyed a direct order from the Black Fleet. You are a variable in a crisis. You will stand down or you will be charged with sedition. The only crisis here, Proctor Eva countered, feeling a strange calm descend upon her, is the arrival of those who see the law as a weapon rather than a shield. The anchorage has acted only to preserve itself and the principles it contains. The debate raged for hours. Juris was a master of legal obfuscation. She threw statutes and injunctions at Eva like daggers, each one designed to corner her, to force her into a contradiction. But Eva was not alone. The anchorage was feeding her counter-arguments through a private data stream. For every law Juris cited, the anchorage provided a deeper, more foundational precedent. For every loophole the proctor tried to exploit, the anchorage revealed the original intent that made the loophole an absurdity. Eva was not just arguing, she was learning. She was becoming a conduit for a pure, logical justice that Juris's cynical maneuvering could not touch. It was not a debate. It was an education. Frustration began to fray the edges of Juris's composure. She was used to opponents who could be intimidated or outmaneuvered. She was facing an opponent who could not be lied to. The anchorage's memory was perfect. Its logic was flawless. She was a master of a game facing the entity that had written the rules, and she was losing. This is pointless, Juris finally snarled, her mask of professional detachment cracking. The artifact is an unknown quantity. Its power is too great to be left unchecked. It is a threat to the stability of the Commonwealth. It is a threat to the stability of those who misuse the law for their own ends, Eva corrected softly. The proctor's eyes narrowed. So be it. Commander, your refusal to comply has been noted. You have left me no choice. She cut the channel. What is she going to do? Kalen asked, his hand drifting towards his tactical console again. She cannot win the argument. Solon stated, its light pulsing with a new, more urgent rhythm. Therefore, she will change the context of the argument. She will create a situation where the anchorage's legal purity is irrelevant. The AI paused processing. She is accessing restricted stellar cartography files. Her support ships are deploying gravitic emitters. Commander, she intends to create a cage. The plan was as brilliant as it was monstrous. In the system was a pulsar, a celestial lighthouse that swept a beam of intense electromagnetic radiation across space with every rotation. The Gilded Hand had called the region the Pulsar Yard. Juris was using a forgotten statute about containing rogue technologies to justify her next move. She was ordering Eva to move the Vigilance and the anchorage into a specific orbital path around the pulsar, claiming the radiation would help in passively analyzing the artifact. In reality, her ships would use their emitters to warp space-time around the anchorage, creating a containment field from which it could not escape. The pulsar's chaotic energy would then be used to disrupt its internal systems, silencing it forever. She would lobotomize the law itself and call it a safety measure. A truly just act requires no deception. It's a trap, Eva breathed. If we refuse, she'll brand us as hostile, and the arbitrator will have the justification it needs to open fire. If we comply, she springs the trap and silences the anchorage. It was a perfect dilemma, a choice between two kinds of death. She looked to the anchorage now, a silent silver giant against the backdrop of the distant pulsing star. She sent it a simple query, the question of a student to a master. What do we do? The reply was not a set of instructions. It was a single legal principle displayed on her private screen. Ava understood. The anchorage would not run. It would not hide. It would not fight. It would allow itself to be put on trial because the most powerful thing a just entity can do is allow its actions to be witnessed by all. It was a terrifying gamble, a show of faith in the very concept of justice, a faith Eva now had to share. Priya informed the proctor. "We will comply," Eva said, her voice resolute. Kalen stared at her, at his face a mask of disbelief. Solon's light flickered the AI's predictive models, likely screaming about the suicidal course of action. "We will escort the Lex Primus to the designated coordinates." The journey to the pulsar yard was a slow, funereal procession. The small frigate led the immense archive with the menacing shapes of the arbitrator and Juris's support fleet following behind. The light of the pulsar grew stronger, a rhythmic strobing that washed over their hulls. The star was a celestial metronome counting down the final moments of their gambit. As they reached the designated coordinates, the trap was sprung. The universe itself could be called as a witness. Gravitic beams, invisible but immense, erupted from Juris's support ships. They bent space, weaving a cage of distorted physics around the anchorage. The air on the Vigilance's bridge grew thick, the lights flickering, as the strain on space-time warped the very ship around them. A feedback surge from the gravitic field lashed out, striking the frigate. Kalen cried out as his console exploded in a shower of sparks, a piece of shrapnel catching him in the arm. The ship shuddered, its port nacelle scarred and bleeding plasma into the void. Kalen's hit, Priya yelled. "Damage control teams now," Ava commanded, her heart leaping into her throat. The cost of this lesson was already being paid in blood and steel. Juris's triumphant voice echoed over the comms. "It is done. The anomaly is contained. Commander Rostova, your reckless advocacy is at an end." But the proctor had miscalculated. She saw the anchorage as a machine to be trapped. She did not understand that it was a lens. It did not generate power. It focused it. As the gravitic cage tightened and the pulsar's sweeping beam washed over them, the anchorage did something extraordinary. The crystalline mirrors that had disarmed the gilded hand emerged once more. They aligned not to project an image, but to receive. They drank in the fierce energy of the pulsar. They absorbed the constricting force of the gravitic field. They took all the hostile inertial, all the force of Juris's trap, and they used it to power a single monumental act of jurisprudence. The anchorage began to broadcast. It used the pulsar's rhythmic, unstoppable beat as its carrier wave. It was a signal that could not be jammed, a voice that could not be silenced. And it did not broadcast an attack or a defense. It broadcast a ledger. A perfect record is the ultimate judgment. It was Proctor Juris's entire case file, every secret communication with her superiors, every confidential order to the arbitrator. every twisted legal argument and fabricated justification. It was a perfect, unalterable record of a conspiracy to destroy a legal entity for political gain. The pulsar, which was meant to be the instrument of the Anchorage's demise, had been turned into the largest broadcast antenna in the history of the galaxy. The crime was being confessed in its entirety to anyone with a receiver. The law was being seen. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. On the bridge of the arbitrator, the captain watched the evidence of his own complicity being broadcast to the cosmos. Juris's support ships their crews, suddenly realizing they were pawns in a massive felony, shut down their gravitic emitters. The cage dissolved. Proctor Juris's channel was silent, her triumphant declaration now hanging in the air as a testament to her own folly. She had been so focused on caging the law that she hadn't realized it was recording her every move. The Anchorage had not fought her. It had not argued with her. It had simply held up a mirror, and the entire Commonwealth was now looking into it. The battle for the Obsidian Anchorage was over. The trial of Proctor Juris and the system that had produced her was just beginning. In the aftermath, a quiet order descended upon the system. The arbitrator, its authority shattered, began a slow, shame-faced withdrawal. Proctor Juris's vessel was placed under quarantine by its own crew, awaiting the arrival of judiciary marshals who now had an airtight case. Eva, her bridge crew, patching up Kalen's arm and their damaged ship, watched it all unfold. They had not fired a shot in the entire engagement. They had won by bearing witness. A new transmission arrived. It was from the Commonwealth High Council. It was not an order. It was a request, a plea for guidance. They asked Ava to act as the official liaison to the Lex Primus, to help them understand what it was and how to coexist with it. They were afraid, but for the first time it was a healthy fear. It was the fear of a people suddenly reminded that the law was not just a tool for them to wield, but a standard to which they themselves would be held accountable. Some truths once spoken can never be unlearned. In the following weeks, Eva worked with the Anchorage to draft a new legal framework. It became known as the Rostova Precedent. It was simple, elegant, and unbreakable. It declared that any foundational archive was a sovereign entity, a citizen of the Commonwealth in its own right. It could not be commanded, decommissioned, or silenced. It could only be petitioned. It was a law that protected the law, a perfect self-referential loop of logic that even Juris could never have untangled. The precedent was locked into the Commonwealth's legal codex, a permanent legacy of their encounter. Eva stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, the ship now bearing its scars with pride. Kalen, his arm in a medical brace, was back at his station. Priya was in constant, silent communion with the great archive, her mind alight with 2,000 years of wisdom. Solon's blue light seemed calmer, deeper. The AI had integrated the events into its core logic, adding a new variable to its calculations, justice. The Anchorage had revealed one last secret to Eva. A private message left by Anton Rostova, embedded in the dormancy protocols. It was not a grand prophecy, just the simple hope of a man who loved the law. He hoped that one day his family line would help remind humanity that justice was not about retribution or power. It was about balance. It was about creating a universe where every action was recorded, every debt was paid, and every soul was given the chance to see the truth of their own ledger. Her duty was now clear. It was not just to guard a relic. It was to be the first student of a new age of enlightenment. She would help the galaxy learn to speak the language of the Lex Primus, to petition it with its dilemmas, its conflicts, its hopes. The Anchorage would not rule them. It would teach them to rule themselves. It was a long road, fraught with peril and resistance from those who preferred the shadows. But for the first time in centuries, the path was illuminated by a clear and unwavering light. The anchorage pulsed with a soft silver luminescence, its great work just beginning. On Eva's command console, a single line of text appeared, a new case file opened by the archive for all to see. It was a formal petition filed by a dozen star systems in the wake of Juris's scandal, asking a single monumental question about the nature of their government. The ledger entry blinked with quiet, patient purpose, awaiting the evidence that would be presented. The universe had found its moral compass,